everyone, thank you for your patience. It's been a while since I posted a video. I've had a lot of stuff going on in my personal life. I just shared a bit about it in the newsletter I sent out today. If you're not signed up for my newsletter, be sure you go to my website and sign up for my mailing list so that you can get updates on what's going on with me and my life and things I'm doing. Thank you for all your patience. And I did get a request a little while ago to talk more about the gallbladder and about gallbladder issues and how to deal with those from a lifestyle and nutrition perspective as opposed to just getting it cut out of you, which really, in my opinion, is not something that probably hardly ever has to happen. And I feel so awful when I hear about people who are going to get their gallbladders taken out because, again, it is just so unnecessary. Most of the time, I never like to give ultimatums of like all or nothing. But man, I really feel like if you implement some very simple natural interventions, this could really be avoided for most people. And I know a lot of people who have had their gallbladders out and they're fine, and they're able to maintain good health. So I don't want anyone to feel like devastated if they've already done it, and then they don't have a gallbladder. It's okay. You can, come back from that for sure. But again, it is just a really unnecessary procedure for most people. And there are a lot of ways to deal with a struggling gallbladder. And I've struggled with my gallbladder myself. And so have a lot of people with chronic illnesses, a lot of my clients and things like that. I work with it a lot. So here's my understanding of gallbladder issues from more of a holistic perspective, and some things you can do to start working on it. So what is the gallbladder? Basically, the gallbladder is bile storage. And now bile is something that helps us break down and digest fat that we ingest, that we eat, which is why a lot of times people notice gallbladder issues when they eat a lot of fat, right? Because it's housing the bile that helps us digest fat, right? And so when we're struggling there, we may have a harder time digesting fat. So bile not only helps with digesting fat, it's also an avenue for detox. So fat-soluble toxins have to go through our bile system, which is stimulated by the liver, because it's actually our liver that produces bile. It's our gallbladder that stores bile. This is why, people with who have had their gallbladders out can still often do a pretty high-fat diet as long as their liver is in really good health, because you're still producing bile through your liver. You're just not like storing extra bile. So it makes it a little more difficult, but as long as your liver is functioning well, it's totally possible. Bile is part of our fat-soluble detoxification system. And so fat-soluble toxins get filtered out through our liver and go into our bile system and come out through our stool. And so this is why people talk about the importance of having regular bowel movements, because we get rid of a lot of toxins through our bile system, which comes out in our stool. Now, interestingly enough, the body likes to be very efficient. It doesn't like to waste anything or any time, and so a lot of bile is actually recirculated. And this is how we can start to really build up toxicity. If our body is really overloaded with toxins, either we're exposed to a lot of toxins, outside of us in our modern lifestyle, or whether we have a lot of gut imbalance and we're producing a lot of excess toxicity inside of us because of an overgrowth of microbes that are producing toxins in our body. Because like 90% of the bile is recirculated, that can really start to build up, right? Even if you're having a bowel movement every day, you might just not be getting enough out, and things can really start to build up. And that's when we start to get kind of like a sludgy gallbladder, right? Because we have bile stored in the gallbladder. If the bile is full of toxins, we start to get this kind of like thick sludge in the gallbladder, and sometimes these can start to turn into gallstones or gallbladder stones or bile stones, where they're stuck in the bile ducts as well, because the body is basically trying to protect us from these toxins that are in this sludge, and so it starts like putting a hard coating around pieces of this toxic sludge in order to protect us and like get them out. And that's a normal process, actually. Everyone creates gallbladder stones, to a certain extent. So it's actually a very normal process, but most of the time they're small enough that like people don't even know that this is happening. And again, it's not inherently a problem. It's only a problem when it really starts to build up in excess. They start to get like really big, or they're not being ejected properly. They're getting stuck in the bile ducts, and then it becomes really painful. And this is when people start to have issues. Really, gallbladder issues are an issue of toxicity. You have more toxicity in your bile system than your detoxification channels can handle in your current condition. And so that's really the root of the issue. So basically, in a really broad sense, what we want to do is we want to reduce your toxic load by intervening in lifestyle practices, living a really non-toxic lifestyle, trying to take that kind of stuff really seriously. Maybe I'll do a video on living a non-toxic lifestyle. I don't think I've done a video on that before, so I should do that. And then improving your gut health, that's going to be a major thing, because that's a huge source of toxicity for a lot of people, is just being produced inside your own body. A lot of people, like Dr. Hulda Clark, who's a really famous naturopath who has worked a lot with gallbladder issues, her whole thing is that, like, bile stones all have dead parasites in them. I don't know how much that's been reproduced, but it is a really interesting hypothesis, that there's a lot of overgrowth of parasites that the body is trying to protect you from, that is related to gallbladder stones. So that's something to consider as well, and potentially do a gallbladder cleanse and do a gut reset and all of that. A parasite cleanse and a gut reset and all of that. So interestingly enough, a lot of people who say... there's this segment of the population who try things like a ketogenic diet or a carnivore diet, and they don't benefit from it. And they do it for like 6 months or a year, and they're like, I felt worse, not better. There's a lot of reasons why that can be. And like I said, this is usually a pretty small minority. Most people just, feel benefit from those kinds of diets. But occasionally we'll get people who say, like, I didn't feel any better, or even like, I did it for a year and I just kept feeling worse. Usually this is the issue. It is to do with a sluggish gallbladder, and it has to do with an excess of fat-soluble toxins stuck in the bile. And when you're trying to eat a lot of fat, your body is trying to digest all that fat, and then it's not recirculating the bile as efficiently, because it's basically like the function is being stretched too thin. And so if you are one of those people that, have tried carnivore or tried keto, and, you didn't really feel like you benefited from it that much, this may be why. That's why some of these diets are actually not appropriate for everyone at every stage in their recovery. I had to go through a stage where I was focused a lot more on eating plant foods in my recovery because of this issue as well. It's not nothing is a one-size-fits-all approach. Nothing is dogmatic when it comes to this kind of stuff. It just depends what stage in your recovery you are and what your body really needs to heal. So, another way that this can happen is if people have done a low-fat diet through most of their life, and then they start eating a lot more fat all of a sudden, or maybe they usually eat a low-fat diet, but then they go eat like a greasy restaurant meal, and then they have like a major gallbladder spasm. It's because the gallbladder is also kind of like a muscle where it is triggered by intake of fats to kind of flush out. Like the gallbladder will kind of spasm when you eat fat, and it'll like flush things out of it, right? And so if you've been eating a low-fat diet, first of all, you also need dietary fat to produce bile in the first place, and so you probably aren't producing a lot of bile that will help you then digest that fat, right? It's kind of a feedback loop. And then you probably have a lot of stuff that's been like backed up in there for a long time because you haven't been eating enough fat to like stimulate your gallbladder. And so it has to kind of like have some spasms of like fat intake to start pushing that like sludge and those toxins out. And so that's another reason that some people can really struggle when they first switch to a high fat diet if they've been doing low fat for a long time before, is because suddenly their body's pushing all this stuff out. So what I usually recommend in that kind of case is to increase your fat intake really slowly. I particularly recommend sour cream. I don't totally understand the science of why, but for some reason sour cream seems to be particularly effective for helping stimulate the gallbladder in a really helpful way. And so start with like a tablespoon, right? Just add it to, eat a spoonful, and then as like your main fat source, if you're eating a pretty lean diet, and then just slowly increase your intake of sour cream, and you can I actually still eat a huge amount of sour cream every day to help support my gallbladder function, as wild as that seems. But yeah, sometimes it takes a cup or two of sour cream a day. It may be like more than half your calories for the day, but it is so therapeutic and beneficial. So you can make your own sour cream. You can use my video tutorial on how to make yogurt and just do it with cream, like exact same process, but do it with cream and make your own sour cream. Or you can buy sour cream at the store. I usually recommend you ferment it for another 24 hours after you buy it, just by leaving it out, and then eat it. But you can buy store-bought sour cream. Organic Valley has a pretty, clean ingredients list if you're looking for that. If you really don't tolerate dairy, you can also use ghee. You can also use olive oil. Olive oil can be really effective. The really famous gallbladder cleanse that some people do is like lemon juice and olive oil. I don't usually recommend that cleanse because it tends to be really hard on people. It can really like cause your gallbladder to spasm very intensely and release a lot of toxins into your system. And so I usually don't recommend that protocol, but you can use olive oil in the way I was suggesting, of just kind of increasing your fat intake like a tablespoon at a time until you're drinking or eating a pretty large amount every day. So that's an option too. The other thing you can do is to really increase your vegetable intake. And so this is a thing that a lot of people who are doing carnivore or keto might miss, is that, while I think most nutrients you can actually get very effectively from animals, you don't really need to rely on plants for many nutrients. Soluble fiber is something you actually really do need to rely on plants for. And so some people do not do well with a very low vegetable intake keto diet or carnivore diet because they actually really need that soluble fiber to help clear out their bile system. And soluble fiber, is a nutrient that you can only get from plants. And so what soluble fiber does is it binds to toxins in your bile system and starts pulling them out. And so sometimes this is like what some people benefit from a very high plant intake diet. I think because it's not from the nutrients in the plant so much, it's the amount of soluble fiber that is helping detoxify their digestive tract. Now, those fibers are very rough on the gut lining, and so if you have a very compromised gut lining, this might not be the best option for you. So it depends what stage of healing you're in, but if your digestion can handle it, eating 6 cups a day of high soluble fiber fruits or veggies or legumes. This is also why some people feel really good when they eat a lot of beans. There are those people out there. It's not a lot, but there are those people out there. So again, depending on what stage of healing you're in, you can also use low starch vegetables, like broccoli, carrots, onions, mushrooms, Brussels sprouts, things like that. And 6 cups a day of this kind of stuff is really like the goal. Obviously, less will still benefit you. Honestly, even if I'm eating a cup or 2 of these vegetables a day, I still notice a benefit in that detoxification process. So that is something to try as well. The other thing would be to implement other kinds of detox practices, and especially ones that are going to target the kind of lower end of your digestive tract and actually help, again, to pull toxins out of your bile system. So one thing you can do is a parasite cleanse, because like I said before, sometimes gallbladder issues are indicative of parasitic overgrowth. The observation that parasites tend to be inside of gallstones. But that's not always the case, but it may be worth a try, and I have a video on parasite cleanses that you can look at. The other thing I would recommend is coffee enemas. And I know that enemas are not super popular in the Western world and can be kind of intimidating for a lot of people, but I have found this to be so beneficial for gallbladder and liver health. And so maybe I'll do another video talking more about that and that process. But there are tons of instructions online on how to do a coffee enema. And what happens is that some of the compounds in coffee seem to really stimulate the detoxification pathways in the liver that are really associated with the detoxification of fat-soluble toxins. And it basically puts your liver into like overdrive and just starts filtering, your whole body, double time, and it just really kicks up your natural detoxification processes and just helps really filter and flush things out. And so I usually recommend doing them like 2 days in a row, back to back, so that you can kind of like really complete a full detoxification cycle. But doing 2 days in a row of coffee enemas back to back, like once a week, if you're really struggling with gallbladder issues, is a really great thing to do. And honestly, like, keep that routine up for at least a few months to really see a difference. But that is really going to help jumpstart some detoxification processes in your body. So I hope that's helpful. Carnivore or keto might not be right for you. Go slowly if you're transitioning from a low-fat diet. Use things like sour cream or olive oil to help, slowly stimulate your gallbladder to spasm and empty out. You might want to include a lot of high soluble fiber veggies if your digestion can handle it, to help that detoxification process. And then potentially a parasite cleanse and coffee enemas. Those are my main tips. I hope that's really helpful. I'd be happy to follow up on any of those videos I talked about maybe doing, or if you have other questions, please let me know.